Millions of Americans are stepping into grocery stores and discovering that even basic food has become unaffordable. In a country drowning under $38 trillion in debt, crushed by a weakening job market, shrinking paychecks, and grocery prices up nearly 30% since 2020, the simple act of buying food now feels like a luxury. Families are budgeting aisle by aisle, putting items back, and relying on food banks at record levels. The grocery store has become the front line of America's cost of living crisis. A silent recession unfolding in carts, checkout lines, and kitchen tables across the nation. Number 10. California. California is the state everyone assumes is thriving. Tech money, billion-dollar companies, coastal wealth. But behind that glossy postcard is a brutal truth. Millions of Californians cannot afford food in 2025. In fact, when you adjust for the cost of living, California has one of the highest poverty rates in America, with roughly 18% of residents, over 7 million people, struggling to meet basic needs. And nothing exposes that reality faster than a trip to the grocery store. A single grocery run in Los Angeles or the Bay Area easily blows past $150 to $200, even for modest households. A gallon of milk that once cost $2.99 is now $5.49. A dozen eggs that averaged $1.50 before the pandemic now sit at $3.99 or higher. Chicken, fruit, vegetables, nearly everything climbed 25 to 40% over the past 4 years. The math simply doesn't work in a state where the median renter already pays over $2,750 a month and gas is still hovering above $5 a gallon. When housing, transportation, and utilities swallow nearly every dollar, groceries become the thing families figure out later. Food banks across California are reporting demand up 60 to 80% compared to pre-pandemic levels. Some centers in Los Angeles County now serve upwards of 900,000 people a month, a number you'd expect after a natural disaster. Not in the fifth largest economy on Earth. Parents who work full-time are lining up before sunrise because they can't afford fresh produce. Seniors living on fixed incomes choose between medication and meals. College students in what should be the land of opportunity are skipping dinner 3 nights a week just to survive tuition and rent. And the cruelest part? This isn't just affecting low-income families. Middle-class Californians, the teachers, medical assistants, office workers, delivery drivers, are now quietly falling into food hardship. When your paycheck barely covers the essentials, the grocery aisle becomes a battlefield of impossible choices. You buy less meat. You skip the brand you used to trust. You stretch ingredients for one more meal. You pretend it's temporary, even though nothing is getting better. California is the warning. A state with enormous wealth, overflowing tax revenue, booming industries, and still millions can't afford a cart of groceries. If this is happening here, what does that say about the rest of the country? Number 9. Nevada. Nevada is a place built on bright lights and constant motion, but for the people who actually live there, the reality is far darker. Behind the casinos, resorts, and booming tourist districts, Nevada hides one of the most alarming cost of living crises in the country. It's a state where grocery prices jumped more than 25% since 2020. Wages haven't kept up, and families are now doing math in the aisles to see what they can afford and what must be left behind. The problem starts with instability. Nevada's economy relies heavily on tourism, gig work, and service sector jobs, many of which pay $13 to $18 an hour, nowhere near enough to keep up with rent, fuel, and food. Even households pulling in around $50,000 to $55,000 a year are slipping into financial quicksand. According to Federal Pulse survey data, over 44% of Nevada families report struggling to cover basic expenses, one of the worst rates in the United States. Grocery spending is swallowing incomes whole. A simple weekly grocery trip for a family of 4 easily hits $180 to $220, and that's without anything special. Meat, dairy, and produce have become luxury items. Fresh fruit is something people now budget for. And in cities like Las Vegas and Reno, where rents exploded by more than 30% in just a few years, families are forced to choose between stable housing and enough food to last the week. Food banks are overwhelmed. The largest centers in Clark County serve tens of thousands every single week, and volunteers say demand has surged beyond pandemic levels. It's no longer just low-income workers showing up. It's hotel staff, casino employees, airport workers, security guards, retail workers, even rideshare drivers who used to rely on tips to survive. Many of them work full-time yet admit they still can't afford 3 meals a day. Nevada reveals a painful contradiction. A state built on entertainment, where the workers keeping the machine running can't afford basic nutrition. The tourists eat buffets overflowing with food, while the locals chopping vegetables in the kitchen are skipping meals at home. It's a quiet emergency, one unfolding under neon lights, inside crowded apartments, and in grocery aisles where every price tag feels like a warning of what's coming next. Number 8. New Mexico. New Mexico is one of the most beautiful states in America. Wide skies, stunning landscapes, culture that stretches generations. But for the people living there, daily life has become a struggle that outsiders rarely see. Food insecurity in New Mexico has reached levels that rival some of the poorest regions in the nation. Recent data shows nearly 1 in 5 households struggling to afford groceries, one of the highest rates in the entire country. The root of the crisis is painfully straightforward. Wages remain among the lowest in the U.S., with many workers earning between $12 and $16 an hour. Meanwhile, the cost of food has surged since 2020, by 25 to 35% depending on the item. A full cart that once cost $70 now hits $110. Fresh produce, meat, and dairy have become the most painful purchases, especially in rural counties where grocery access is limited and prices run higher because transportation costs are stacked onto every item. New Mexico also suffers from one of the worst child hunger rates in the country. In many school districts, more than 70% of children rely on subsidized meals, making the school cafeteria the most reliable food source they have. When school is out, even for weekends, parents scramble to fill the gap. Food pantries report sharp increases in families seeking emergency groceries just to bridge the 2-day stretch between Friday and Monday. Rural communities are hit even harder. Some families drive 30 to 60 miles just to reach the nearest grocery store. Gas, now around $3.50 to $4 per gallon, becomes an additional tax on survival. When you're forced to spend $12 to $20 in fuel just to shop, you buy less food. You stretch meals. You ration portions. You pretend it's temporary. New Mexico's grocery crisis isn't loud or dramatic. It's slow and quiet. It's the mother who skips dinner so her kids have enough. It's the elderly man choosing canned soup over fresh food because it lasts longer. It's parents who work every day, yet feel like they are sinking deeper financially with each week. Food, in New Mexico, has become less of a choice and more of a calculation. A painful reminder that surviving isn't the same as living. Number 7. Alabama. Alabama's struggle isn't new, but what's happening now is unlike anything the state has seen in decades. Grocery prices have climbed relentlessly since 2020, often 30% or higher, while wages in many parts of Alabama remain stubbornly low. With a median household income around $59,600, families are being crushed by a cost-of-living crisis that has turned everyday food shopping into a moment of anxiety, hesitation, and sacrifice. More than 40% of households in Alabama say they struggle to afford basic expenses. This is one of the highest hardship rates in the United States, and it shows up painfully in the grocery aisle. A family that once spent $120 per week on food now spends closer to $160 to $190. All while getting far less than they used to. Meat is becoming a special occasion item. Fresh fruits are being replaced by cheaper canned goods, and parents are buying less protein so their children can eat more. In rural Alabama, the crisis is even worse. Entire counties have only 1 or 2 grocery stores serving miles of farmland and aging highways. Many small towns are essentially food deserts, where residents drive 30 miles or more just to reach a supermarket. The extra gas cost, now often $3.20 to $3.50 per gallon, makes the trip even harder. Families living paycheck to paycheck simply don't have the spare money to shop frequently, so they stretch meals and ration portions. Food banks across Alabama are overwhelmed. Some report demand up 50 to 70% compared to before the pandemic. Volunteers say the faces have changed. It's not just the unemployed or retired. It's nurses, warehouse workers, retail employees, teachers, and single parents working full-time yet unable to afford enough food. Humiliation turns into silence, and silence turns into hunger. Alabama also has one of the nation's highest rates of chronic illness linked to poor diets. When healthier foods cost significantly more, families are pushed toward cheaper processed options, not by choice, but by necessity. It becomes a cycle. Food you can afford makes you sick, but food that keeps you healthy is out of reach. The story unfolding in Alabama is heartbreaking but brutally simple. Wages can't keep up with prices, and the grocery store has become proof of that imbalance. Behind every cart with fewer items is a family doing everything right, and still falling behind. Number 6. West Virginia. West Virginia is a place where communities are tight, families know each other by name, and the mountains rise like old guardians. But those mountains also conceal a worsening crisis, one that shows itself most clearly in the grocery store. West Virginia has been battling poverty for generations, but what's happening now cuts deeper. With some of the lowest median incomes in the country, around $55,000, and food prices that have surged 25 to 35% since 2020, even basic groceries feel out of reach for thousands of families. In many counties, the nearest full-service grocery store is a long drive away, 20, 30, sometimes 40 miles. Gas, sitting at $3.30 to $3.70 a gallon, turns every shopping trip into an added expense families cannot ignore. That extra $10 in fuel often means buying fewer vegetables, skipping meat, or trading fresh produce for canned goods. Rural life was once a source of peace. Now it's a barrier to survival. West Virginia also ranks among the worst in the nation for households struggling to cover basic expenses. Nearly 45% of adults report difficulty paying for essentials, rent, utilities, and especially groceries. In towns hollowed out by factory closures and shrinking job opportunities, paychecks vanish before the cart is even full. A week's worth of groceries for a small family can easily reach $150 to $180, a painful blow in communities where many workers earn $12 to $15 an hour. Food banks, once supplemental for the poorest families, have become lifelines for working households. In regions like the southern coalfields, demand has skyrocketed. Volunteers describe parking lots filling before sunrise, cars stretching down the road, and parents waiting patiently for a small box of staples: rice, pasta, beans, peanut butter. It's not enough, but it's something. West Virginia's grocery crisis is shaped by slow-moving forces. Decades of economic decline, low wages, rural isolation, but the impact is immediate. Families buy cheaper food because they can't afford better. Seniors skip meals to stretch Social Security checks. Parents quietly choose hunger so their kids don't have to. The mountains have always made West Virginia feel isolated from the world. But today, that isolation shows up in a different way. Empty pantries, rationed meals, and a grocery aisle that feels heavier with each passing year. Number 5. Oklahoma. Oklahoma has always been known for resilience: tornadoes, droughts, hard seasons. But the crisis unfolding now is quieter, heavier, and far more widespread. It's not a natural disaster, it's the grocery store. The price of food in Oklahoma has climbed by 30% or more since 2020, while wages in many towns still hover around $13 to $17 an hour. That math doesn't work, and Oklahomans feel it every time they walk into Walmart, Homeland, or Crest. More than 43% of households in Oklahoma report struggling to afford basic expenses, among the highest in the nation. Food insecurity rates sit at levels usually associated with national recessions, not periods when economists claim the economy is strong. A week's groceries for a family of 4 now costs $160 to $200, even when choosing the cheapest brands. Ground beef that was $3.49 a pound is now $5.99. A bag of apples that once cost $5 now reaches $8 or more. Families aren't just cutting back, they're giving up entire food categories. Rural Oklahoma is where the hunger crisis hits hardest. Many counties have one grocery store serving dozens of miles, and small-town shops often price items 10 to 20% higher than urban stores due to transportation costs. Add gas averaging $3.10 to $3.40 per gallon, and every trip to town chips away at already thin paychecks. Food banks are overwhelmed. Regional centers from Tulsa to Lawton report demand rising 50 to 80% compared to pre-pandemic levels. Volunteers describe people showing up in business casual clothes, bank tellers, office clerks, teachers, because even stable jobs don't stretch far enough anymore. SNAP benefits aren't keeping pace with inflation, pushing thousands into deeper hardship. Oklahoma's crisis is also tied to health. The state has some of the highest rates of obesity and chronic illness, conditions made worse by the fact that processed food is far cheaper than fresh, healthy options. Parents are forced to choose cheaper calories over better nutrition, not because they want to, but because they have no choice. There's no headline-grabbing event to blame in Oklahoma, just the slow grind of prices rising faster than people's paychecks. And in grocery aisles across the state, you can feel that pressure in every hesitant hand reaching for something too expensive to buy. Number 4. Louisiana. Louisiana has weathered hurricanes, floods, and economic shocks, but the struggle unfolding today is different. It's quieter than a storm, but far more widespread. Louisiana now has one of the highest poverty rates in the entire country, with roughly 19% of residents living below the poverty line. Add grocery inflation that has risen 30 to 40% since 2020, and the result is a state where millions of people are fighting to keep food on the table. In cities like New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Shreveport, grocery prices have risen to levels families simply cannot sustain. A standard grocery trip easily reaches $170 to $220, even when choosing store brands. Fresh produce has become painfully expensive. Meat prices have doubled in some categories. Families stretch food longer than it's meant to last. Kids eat smaller portions. Parents quietly skip meals so there's enough for everyone else. Outside the cities, the crisis deepens. Rural Louisiana is one of the hardest-hit regions in the country. Many parishes are classified as food deserts, where residents must drive 20 to 50 miles to find a full grocery store. Gas, often around $3.20 to $3.60 per gallon, turns every trip into a financial decision. People buy shelf-stable food because it's cheaper and lasts longer, knowing it's less healthy but more realistic. Food banks in Louisiana are operating at emergency levels year-round. The Greater Baton Rouge Food Bank has reported serving tens of thousands of additional families each month compared to pre-pandemic years. In some areas, demand has doubled. Volunteers describe cars lining up hours before distribution begins. Seniors, single parents, young couples, full-time workers, all needing help to get through the week. Louisiana's crisis is intensified by the state's fragile job market. Many industries offer wages that barely exceed $10 to $14 an hour, nowhere near enough to keep up with rising prices. A family earning $45,000 a year is still drowning under rent, utilities, medical bills, and groceries that consume half the paycheck. The hardest part? Most of the people suffering aren't doing anything wrong. They're working, they're budgeting, they're sacrificing. And still, the grocery store feels like a place where they must defend every dollar. Louisiana is living through a slow-moving emergency, one that doesn't make national headlines but shows up in every pantry, every checkout line, and every family trying to stretch one more meal out of what little they have. Number 3. Mississippi. Mississippi has always carried the reputation of being one of the poorest states in the nation, but the situation today is beyond anything those labels can capture. This is the front line of America's grocery crisis. Mississippi has one of the highest poverty rates in the entire country, and, more importantly, the highest share of income spent on food. Even though groceries here are cheaper than in many states, it doesn't matter. Incomes are simply too low to keep up. A typical Mississippi household earns around $52,000 a year, one of the lowest medians in the nation. That might have been survivable before 2020. But after food inflation surged 30 to 40%, families are now spending a staggering proportion of their paycheck on groceries, sometimes 20 to 25%, double the national average. A week's worth of food for a family of 4 easily hits $150 to $180, and that's before adding the cost of gas, utilities, rent, and medical bills. Food insecurity in Mississippi is among the worst in America. In some counties, nearly 1 in 4 households struggle to consistently afford enough food. Food banks are drowning under demand. The Mississippi Food Network, which already served hundreds of thousands before the pandemic, now reports lines that wrap around buildings and run out into the street. Volunteers say families are showing up in cars running on fumes, literally rolling in with the last few miles left in the tank. In rural Mississippi, the crisis is even more crushing. Entire communities rely on a single grocery store. Many others depend on convenience stores, where prices are higher and fresh food is scarce. People drive 20 to 30 miles each way to shop, adding $10 to $15 in gas to a bill they already can't afford. Parents dilute milk so it lasts. Seniors skip dinner so Social Security checks can stretch. Kids learn to pretend they aren't hungry because the refrigerator is half empty. These aren't rare stories, they're everyday realities. Mississippi isn't just facing a grocery crisis, it is the warning signal for the rest of the country. A place where wages collapsed long before prices rose. A place hit hardest by the storm of inflation, low income, and chronic economic neglect. Mississippi shows what happens when an entire state is left behind and forced to fight for food in the richest nation on earth. Number 2. Arkansas. Arkansas now carries a painful and alarming title: the highest food insecurity rate in the United States. Nearly 19% of households struggle to afford enough food, almost 1 in 5 families. This isn't a temporary spike. It's a deep structural crisis that's been worsening for years. And the grocery store has become the clearest evidence of just how fragile daily life has become. The average household income in Arkansas sits around $54,000, far below the national median. Meanwhile, food prices have surged 30% or more since 2020. That combination alone is enough to push families into hunger. But the situation is intensified by something else: the disappearance of affordable grocery options. Many parts of the state are considered food deserts, where people travel long distances just to buy fresh food. A standard week of groceries for a family now costs $150 to $190, depending on the region. Meat, eggs, and fresh produce have become special purchases instead of routine items. Parents walk into stores hoping to stick to a budget and walk out shocked. $80 barely buys the essentials. For families living paycheck to paycheck, every extra dollar spent on groceries is a dollar taken from rent, electricity, or gas. Food banks across Arkansas say demand has skyrocketed, up 50 to 70% in some communities. The Arkansas Food Bank and Northwest Arkansas Food Bank have reported record-breaking lines, including many first-time visitors. These aren't people who made bad decisions. They're teachers, warehouse workers, construction workers, caregivers, people who get up, work hard, and still end the week unsure how they'll put food on the table. Rural areas are hit hardest. Some families travel 25 to 40 miles for groceries, burning through $10 to $15 in gas per trip. Others rely on corner stores with inflated prices and limited options. Healthy food becomes a luxury, and cheaper, processed food fills the gap, leading to long-term health issues that only deepen the cycle of poverty. Arkansas exposes a brutal truth. Even in a state with a low cost of living, you can still be one grocery trip away from hunger. Food isn't optional. But for many Arkansans, it's becoming unaffordable, unpredictable, and increasingly out of reach. Number 1. Texas. Texas is a land of contrasts: booming cities, rising skylines, massive industries, and enormous wealth. Yet beneath that image lies a crisis far bigger than most Americans realize. Texas has the largest number of food-insecure people in the entire United States. Roughly 17.6% of Texans, or over 5.3 million people, struggle to afford enough food. No state comes close to Texas in sheer volume of hunger. And the crisis is growing. Even though Texas boasts strong job numbers, the reality is far different for the people who actually live there. Wages haven't kept up with the rising cost of living. Rents in places like Dallas, Austin, and Houston jumped 25 to 40% in recent years. Groceries climbed nearly 30% since 2020. Gas, often around $3.20 to $3.70 per gallon, adds another burden. The result? Paychecks evaporate before families even finish their weekly shopping list. A typical grocery run for a family of 4 in Texas now costs $160 to $200, a heavy blow in a state where millions earn between $12 and $18 an hour. For many households, surviving means buying less protein, skipping produce, and relying on cheaper processed foods. The grocery store becomes a place where every choice comes with guilt and calculation. Food banks in Texas are overwhelmed. The Houston Food Bank, one of the largest in the country, now serves over 1 million people every month. In North Texas, demand has risen nearly 40% compared to pre-pandemic years. Volunteers describe parking lots filling hours before distribution starts. These aren't just low-income families. Middle-class workers, teachers, medical assistants, retail staff, delivery drivers are joining the lines. Rural Texas adds another layer of hardship. Entire counties lack a full-service grocery store. Residents drive 40 to 60 miles round-trip just to shop. That alone can drain $15 to $20 in fuel, money they don't have to spare. What makes Texas especially heartbreaking is the contradiction. A state with booming wealth and thriving industries, yet millions cannot afford food. A place where billion-dollar companies expand downtown while families skip meals in the suburbs. Texas isn't just experiencing a grocery crisis. It's experiencing a silent humanitarian emergency. And it's happening in plain sight.